Harry Potter is full of things that we just accept, right? Magic and flying broomsticks and apparating. We just accept them for the story. But sometimes the story has us accepting things that actually, even in the rules of the wizarding world, don't make any sense at all. So today I'm going to talk about 5 wild plot holes from Harry Potter. Let's start with one that has always bothered me. The Weasleys are supposed to be this desperately poor family, right? They can barely afford school supplies. Ron has got secondhand everything. They are scraping by year after year. But why? Arthur Weasley has a job at the Ministry of Magic, right? And he's not some entry-level employee either. He's the head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office. Sure, it's not the most prestigious department, but it's still a proper government job with presumably a decent salary. And he's been there for years, right? Decades even. You'd think after that long, he'd have had a few promotions, a few pay rises. Like, he's clearly competent. He ends up pretty high up in the ministry by the end of the series. And so I don't feel like it makes sense that he's paid so little that his family are struggling that much. Especially because based on Hogwarts legacy, Weasleys are a prestigious old wizarding family. They've been around for a while. And Molly, she's from the Pruitt family. They're also a pretty old family as well, right? So why don't they have legacy gold like every other long-standing magical family seems to have? The Potters, the Black family, the Malfoys. Why don't the Pruitts and the Weasleys have generational wealth like everybody else? And look, you might say, they've got 7 kids. Cost a lot of money to raise 7 kids. Fair point, right? That's a lot of school supplies, a lot of robes, a lot of wands. And in the UK, I looked it up, the average cost of raising a child to 18 years old is £166,000. So for the Weasleys, that's over £1 million worth of child raising costs, or whatever the galleon equivalent of that is. Not cheap, right? So that begs the question, why doesn't Molly work? Now look, before all the kids have started Hogwarts, I get it. She's got young children at home, she's raising them, that is a full-time job. No arguments from me. But after Ginny starts at Hogwarts and Chamber of Secrets, all of the Weasley children are either away working or at boarding school for most of the year. The burrow is empty. Molly is at home by herself for 9 months out of 12. And yet they're so poor that they let Ron use a broken wand for an entire year. A wand that actively backfires on him, that makes his spells go wrong, could seriously injure him, and that makes an entire year of his education kinda pointless because he just can't do anything. If you are that strapped for cash, surely Molly could get a job. At least during term time, right, when the kids aren't even home. Hell, she could work at Hogwarts. Thanks to the Flu Network, it's not much of a commute. It fits in with term time, she's near her kids if they need her, and it plays to her strengths, right? She's brilliant at household magic. She's nurturing, she's good at looking after people, she can cook, she can clean, she can do laundry. I'm sure there's a lot she could do around Hogwarts to make sure it runs smoothly. She could help run the kitchens, she could assist Madame Pomfrey. Hell, after seeing her battle Bellatrix in the final book, she could run the bloody dueling club. Now look, I'm fairly anti-capitalism. I know I have sponsored segments in my videos sometimes. I have to participate in capitalism. I don't love it, but I do have a mortgage to pay. At my core, I feel like she shouldn't have to work if she doesn't want to. But if your family is genuinely struggling, if your kids are going without basic necessities like a functioning wand, then maybe it's time to consider just something small and part-time. And then there's the prize money situation, right? In Prisoner of Azkaban, the Weasleys win 700 galleons in the Daily Prophet's Grand Prize Galleon draw. That is a significant amount of money, enough to make a real difference to their financial situation. And what do they do with it? They blow it all on a holiday to Egypt. And I'm torn. Is that irresponsible? Or is it, like, understandable? Like, I go back and forth, right? On the one hand, you have a family that has been struggling financially for years. They just came into a lump sum that could ease their burden significantly. Maybe they could have saved it, invested it, used it as a safety blanket to make things a little bit easier for the next few years. At least while you wait for Percy and Fred and George to turn 18, start working and start contributing. On the other hand, they have been scrimping and saving and stressing about money for so long. They've been making do with hand-me-downs and broken wands and embarrassment in Diagon Alley. Maybe they just deserve to let loose for once, right? To have a proper family holiday, to make some memories, to actually enjoy themselves without worrying about every knut and every sickle. Nut? Knut? How do you say it? Anyway, what do you think? Should the Weasleys have saved their winnings, or were they right to spend it and enjoy it? Let me know in the comments. Alright, let's talk about the protections around the Philosopher's Stone, the thing that grants immortality and unlimited wealth. Supposedly one of the most valuable objects in existence, and it's protected by a series of puzzles that 3 11-year-olds can solve in one evening. So let's break this down, shall we? First, there's Fluffy, a 3-headed dog. Fair enough, that's actually quite a good obstacle. Except that Harry tells anyone who will listen exactly how they can get past it. Then you got the Devil's Snare, dangerous plant, sure, but Hermione learned all about it in first-year herbology, so any moderately competent wizard who went to school for 6 months probably know how to get past that. Then there's the flying keys, right? And you need to catch the correct one to unlock the door. But my question is, Why is the correct key even there? Just don't put the right key in the room. No correct key, nobody can open the door. Nobody can proceed and steal the stone. Job done. Stone protected. Same with the chess game, right? Just make it a game of chess that can't be won. Rig it against whoever the contestant is. Have it set up so there's literally no sequence of moves that can lead to victory. Snape's potion riddle. Why does the riddle have an answer? Just don't include the clue to the one that will get you through. Or better yet, make all the bottles poison. That way you can't progress and you can't get the stone. It's baffling. The stone is ultimately protected by the Mirror of Erised anyway, which Dumbledore enchanted so that only someone who wanted to find it but not use it could retrieve it. It's a protection basically you can't solve if you want to steal the stone. So no matter what, it's safe. And that kind of makes all the other protections completely pointless. And look, I get it. This was supposedly Dumbledore testing Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Specifically Harry, because he knew he would grow up to have to fight Voldemort. Testing him to see what he was made of, right? But the other teachers didn't know that. They weren't clued up on the fact that they were testing the future chosen one. So when Dumbledore comes to them and says, protect the stone, why are they giving protections that can be solved so easily? If you can't tell, I find that really, really infuriating. So Hermione Granger is Muggle-born. She grew up in the non-magical world with her dentist parents. She didn't live through Voldemort's reign of terror. She wasn't there when he was killing people left and right. When hearing his name meant Death Eaters might be nearby, and when saying it out loud could get you killed, Hermione wasn't even a twinkle in her father's eye. So why is she scared to say Voldemort's name when she comes to Hogwarts? Like, I could understand if she chose not to say it out of respect or solidarity with wizards who did live through that trauma. That would actually be very Hermione, right? She's empathetic, she's considerate, she understands that words can hurt even if they don't hurt her personally. You know, if she said, I don't say it because I know how it upsets people who lived through the war, who experienced those traumatic events, that would make total sense. But that's not what happens. She is genuinely afraid to say Voldemort's name. In the early books, like everyone else, she refers to him as you-know-who, and when she finally says Voldemort in the Order of the Phoenix, it's portrayed as this huge, brave moment. She has to work herself up to it. She's nervous about it. It clearly takes effort for her. And that's not someone who's being respectful of others' trauma. That's someone who's actually scared of the name. But why? What is she scared of? She wasn't there. She has no personal connection to that fear. She didn't lose anyone to Voldemort, at least not until much later in the series. She didn't grow up hearing whispered horror stories about what happened when he was in power. And the thing is, this isn't just about Hermione. This is about every Muggle-born wizard in the wizarding world. At least the ones who joined the wizarding world after Voldemort's first downfall. They all seem to be scared of the name, even though they didn't live through Voldemort's first rise to power. You could say the same thing about Dean Thomas. You could say it about Colin Creevey. Not saying it out of respect makes sense. Being scared to say it, absolutely absurd. So this is one of those things that makes less and less sense the more you think about it. Wizards apparently have no idea how Muggles live. They can't dress like them, they don't understand basic technology, they think rubber ducks are fascinating mysteries of Muggle ingenuity.
What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?
Like Arthur Weasley is obsessed with Muggle artifacts, but still can't pronounce electricity correctly. And he's amazed by things like plugs and batteries as if they're incomprehensible alien technology. From the very first scene in the very first book, when Vernon is at work in the aftermath of Voldemort's first downfall, we see that wizards are so different in how they dress and how they act. And that's continued in the fourth book at the Quidditch World Cup. They wear ponchos with nothing underneath, or flowery nightgowns, or kilts with handbags. These are grown adults who apparently have never seen a Muggle wear clothes before. But here's the thing, Ron himself points out in the Chamber of Secrets that most wizards these days are half-blood anyway. If we hadn't married Muggles, we'd have died out. So wizards are constantly marrying Muggles. Even those who don't marry Muggles are probably friends with somebody who has married a Muggle, unless they're like a blood purist, Death Eater type. But most wizards, I imagine, probably have interacted with Muggle-marrying wizards, or married a Muggle themselves. They'll have Muggle-born friends, Muggles-in-law, Muggle siblings, Muggle parents. Plus, and this is the really important bit, Hogsmeade is stated to be the only entirely non-Muggle settlement in Britain. The only one, which means that every other wizard in the country lives among Muggles. They see them every single day. They live on the same streets. They shop in the same towns. Presumably, they interact with them constantly. Even wizards who live in magical areas like Diagon Alley or Grimmauld Place still have to walk past Muggles and navigate Muggle spaces. They exist in the same world. So how do they not understand basic Muggle behavior? It's not like Muggles are this isolated tribe that wizards only hear about in fairy tales. You literally cannot avoid them unless you lock yourself in Hogwarts or the Ministry or never leave Hogsmeade. It's like living in France your whole life, being surrounded by French people, having French relatives, maybe even marrying a French person, and not knowing a single word of French. It's basically impossible unless you're actively trying not to learn. Let's talk about Voldemort's absolutely baffling approach to hiding his Horcruxes. This is the darkest wizard of all time, right? The guy who's so paranoid about death that he split his soul into 7 pieces and hides them in objects so he can achieve immortality. You'd think somebody that obsessed with not dying would put a bit more thought and effort into where he hides these soul fragments. But no, he keeps them all in Britain. The same tiny little island. They're all there. Technically one of them, the diadem, was in Albania for a while, but Voldemort brought it on back to Britain. To Hogwarts specifically. And I cannot for the life of me figure out why. Like, the entire point of Horcruxes is that as long as they are around, they will prolong your life, even if your body is destroyed. Meaning you want to make them as hard to find and destroy as possible, right? So surely you'd hide them so well that nobody would even suspect they exist, let alone know where they are. And so surely the smart move is to spread them out across different continents. Put one in Albania, sure, leave it there. Put one in America, one in Asia, one in Australia. Is Australia in Asia? Different people learn different things about continents, right? Some people learn there are like 7, some learn there are 8, some learn there are like 5. We learned that Australia was in Australasia, but I've heard people say Oceania, and other people just say it's part of Asia. If anyone is a continent expert, please tell me where is Australia. The point is, Voldemort needs to make it so even if someone found out he had made Horcruxes, they would have to travel the whole world to find them all. Like, I've heard people say he should just make pebbles, Horcruxes, right, and throw them into the ocean, which I understand the idea, they would be very hard to find, but I just don't feel like that would work. Like, I feel like they have to be in powerful or significant magical items, right? Either for the Horcrux magic to work, or just because of Voldemort's ego. He thinks so much of himself, there's no way he's putting part of his soul in a pebble a penguin might have pooped on. But look, even if they have to be significant objects, you can still spread them out geographically. Hide the Slytherin locket in Britain, sure, but put the Hufflepuff cup in Peru. Put the diadem in Egypt, you know, make people work for it. But no, Voldemort puts them all within a few hundred miles of each other. You could literally destroy them all in a long weekend. And that's baffling because Voldemort knows that Slughorn is still out there. Slughorn hasn't been recruited to the Death Eaters. He actively avoids them when they come knocking. And surely Voldemort knows that Slughorn still remembers when Tom Riddle once asked him about Horcruxes. That is a loose end. That Horcrux secret is not entirely secure. And so here's what's wild. If that secret gets out, who is the one wizard most likely to come after him? Albus Dumbledore, the only wizard he ever feared. And Dumbledore lives at Hogwarts all the time, and yet Voldemort decided to store one of his Horcruxes there. Either he's an absolute nutter who never thinks something through, or he's so arrogant, he wanted to keep it right under Dumbledore's nose so we could laugh about it later. And even if that's the case, at least put one on the other side of the world. Take your gaunt ring to New Zealand, visit Hobbiton, give it to a little hobbit there. I'm sure that'll never get destroyed. If you liked hearing me talk about these plot holes, I talk about 5 more plot holes from Harry Potter in this video, and why what Hermione does to protect her parents, I think, is a giant waste of time.